It was a warm, sunny afternoon at one of the most luxurious car dealerships in the city. The glass walls gleamed in the sunlight, and the polished floors inside reflected the shine of every high-end vehicle parked on display. Outside, a row of sleek sports cars and custom luxury vehicles lined the curb like trophies, each one worth more than most people made in a year. Inside, the sales team stood near the main counter, sipping espresso from tiny cups and chatting about commissions and weekend plans. They wore sharp designer suits, their shoes spotless, hair perfectly styled. Laughter echoed lightly through the showroom until the front door opened. A man walked in and everything changed. He wore grease-stained overalls, heavy work boots, and a faded cap pulled low over his face. His hands were rough, calloused, and blackened with oil. He didn't fit the image of a typical customer at a place like this. The room fell quiet. Heads turned. One of the younger salesmen raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk. Another whispered something under his breath, and a few chuckles followed. Nobody said it aloud, but the judgment was instant. He didn't belong here. The man walked up to the nearest car and gave it a slow, appreciative look. It was the dealership's crown jewel, an exotic sports car with a handcrafted interior carbon fiber body, and a price tag well over $200,000. The kind of car celebrities drove and billionaires collected. Without hesitation, he turned to the nearest salesman and asked, "Can I take a closer look at this one?" The young salesman, barely in his late 20s, with slicked back hair and a smug attitude, turned around, clearly surprised. He looked the man up and down, from the oil stains on his sleeves to the worn-out boots on his feet. Then came the smirk. "This one?" he asked, tapping the hood with fake familiarity. "It's a little out of most people's range. Maybe you'd like to check out something in the certified pre-owned section?" A few other customers nearby glanced over, whispering and trying not to laugh. One woman nudged her partner, and raised her brows, as if saying, "Can you believe this guy?" The mechanic didn't flinch. He simply nodded toward the car again. "I'd like to see the interior, if that's all right." The salesman gave a short laugh, almost as if it slipped out. "Sir, this model is reserved for serious buyers. We usually don't open it up for just anyone. You understand, right?" The mechanic didn't respond. He just stood there, still and quiet, eyes fixed on the car like it held a deeper meaning. In the back of the showroom, a senior salesperson had been watching the scene unfold. She was older, dressed more modestly than the others, and carried herself with quiet professionalism. Her expression wasn't smug or amused. It was thoughtful. She had seen this kind of moment before, when people made snap judgments based on clothes, skin, or grease under the nails. And she had also seen those moments turn on a dime, so she waited, curious, because something about this man told her he wasn't just here to look. The mechanic stayed calm, showing no sign of offense or anger. There was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet patience as he spoke again. "I'd like to take it for a test drive, if that's possible." The young salesman blinked, then let out a short, mocking laugh. "A test drive," he repeated, as if the words were a joke. "Sir, this car isn't something we just hand the keys over for. It's by appointment only, and strictly for serious buyers." He emphasized the last two words with a forced smile, the kind that barely masked his condescension. One of his co-workers chuckled behind him, clearly enjoying the show. Still, the mechanic didn't flinch. He reached into his worn jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was slightly wrinkled, but when he opened it, crisp $100 bills peeked out. Alongside the cash were neatly stacked documents, proof of funds, insurance paperwork, and a printed pre-approval from a private bank. The laughter stopped. The young salesman's smile faltered as his eyes darted to the envelope, then back to the man's face. Before he could say another word, the senior salesperson stepped forward. "I'll assist him," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The younger salesman hesitated, clearly unsure what to do, but stepped back without protest. The senior salesperson turned to the mechanic with a small, respectful nod. "Thank you for your patience, sir. If you'll follow me, I'll get the keys and have someone bring the car around." For the first time since he walked in, the mechanic smiled, just a little. And as he followed her out, the room stayed silent. The judgmental eyes now watched him with something else behind them. Uncertainty. The luxury car was soon pulled around front, gleaming under the afternoon sun. The mechanic opened the driver's door without hesitation and slid inside, the senior salesperson taking the passenger seat beside him. From inside the showroom, curious eyes pressed against the windows. A few of the younger employees stood by the glass, whispering and nudging each other. One discreetly pulled out his phone, hitting record. They were expecting a show, maybe a few stalls, a missed gear, or even a stalled engine. Anything that would confirm what they already believed: he didn't belong behind the wheel of a car like that. But the moment the engine purred to life, it was clear they were wrong. The mechanic drove with confidence, his movements smooth and precise. He handled the powerful machine like someone who had done it 100 times before. No jerking, no hesitation, just control. He didn't take it easy either. He knew the car's power, and he let it show within reason, never reckless. He tested the acceleration, the cornering, the responsiveness. The senior salesperson watched quietly, occasionally glancing over at him, clearly impressed. By the time they returned to the dealership 20 minutes later, the smirks had faded from the faces inside. The mechanic stepped out of the car, calm and collected, a small but satisfied smile on his face. And the senior salesperson? She nodded approvingly. "That was some of the best driving I've seen from a customer," she said, loud enough for others to hear. No one laughed this time. The mechanic walked back into the showroom, still calm, still quiet, but now carrying something more than just confidence, certainty. The kind that made people pause. He made his way to the front desk and looked around until his eyes met the young salesman's. The same one who had laughed at him earlier. "I'll take it," the mechanic said simply. "Full payment." The room froze. The young salesman blinked rapidly, unsure if he heard that right. "Oh, you mean the car, the sports model." The mechanic nodded, holding up a cashier's check with the dealership's name already printed on it. "Everything's here, you can count it." The salesman took a cautious step forward, reaching for the check as if it might disappear. His mouth opened, but no words came out. A few customers nearby turned their heads, someone let out a low whistle. The manager was called over, a well-dressed man in his 40s who looked confused at first, then surprised. He examined the check, glanced at the paperwork the mechanic had previously provided, and gave a slow nod of approval. "Everything checks out," he said, then looked at the young salesman, clearly displeased. "Get the final paperwork ready." Before the flustered salesman could react, the senior salesperson stepped in with a warm smile. "I'll take it from here," she said kindly. Then she turned to the mechanic. "We'll include our VIP package at no additional cost. You've earned it." The mechanic gave a small nod, still humble. He hadn't raised his voice once, but he'd said more than enough. As the paperwork was being finalized, the dealership began to settle back into its usual rhythm. But a sense of quiet awe lingered in the air. The man who had been judged the moment he walked in was now the proud new owner of their most expensive car, and he had paid for it outright. One of the younger employees, still wide-eyed, finally worked up the courage to approach him. There was no malice in his tone this time, just genuine curiosity. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for a living?" The mechanic glanced up, his expression gentle. For a moment he hesitated, then he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I run a chain of auto repair shops," he said. 13 locations now, started with just one, back when I had nothing. Used to sleep in my truck for 2 years while I saved enough to buy tools." There was a pause. No one said a word, the air had shifted again. "I didn't have much," he continued. "But I knew how to fix things. So I worked, day and night, grew slowly, hired people who couldn't get a second chance anywhere else. Veterans, single parents, guys just out of prison. Gave them jobs, trained them. Some of them manage the shops now." The employee nodded slowly, clearly moved, but the surprises weren't over. "I also teach part-time at a technical college," the mechanic added. "Auto mechanics and electrical systems. Try to help the next generation learn what I had to figure out the hard way." And then, as if dropping it casually, he said, "I'm also on the advisory board for a group of automotive engineers. Helped design some of the internal systems on that car you just sold me." The room went still again. He had helped design the very vehicle they thought he couldn't afford to sit in. The senior salesperson just smiled, not surprised in the least, but the others, they were stunned. All their assumptions, their smirks, their laughter, it all collapsed in a single moment of truth. The man in greasy overalls wasn't just a mechanic, he was a builder, a teacher, a leader, and far more successful than any of them had imagined. The young salesman, still processing what he had just heard, took a few steps toward the mechanic as he prepared to leave. His face flushed with embarrassment, and he shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, he wasn't sure how to act. "Look, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how I treated you earlier," he stammered, his voice unsteady. I didn't mean to be rude, didn't expect." He trailed off, unable to finish his sentence. The mechanic looked at him, his expression calm and steady. He hadn't asked for an apology, but he knew how important it was for the young man to understand. "No need to apologize," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of experience. "But let this be a lesson, never judge a book by its cover. People are more than they seem." The mechanic turned to leave, his steps steady and sure. There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness in his eyes. He had made his point without raising his voice, without humiliation. He wasn't here for an apology, he was here to show them that assumptions could be deadly. As he stepped out of the showroom, the young salesman stood there, frozen for a moment, still processing the impact of the words he'd just heard. Inside, the senior salesperson gave a thoughtful look to the young salesman and the others who had witnessed the exchange. "I hope you've all learned something today," she said quietly, her gaze sweeping over the group. "We're in the business of selling, but more importantly, we're in the business of respect. Never assume who someone is by what they look like." The manager, overhearing her, nodded in agreement. Later that day, the dealership began reviewing their customer training policies. They made a note to include lessons on humility, respect, and how to treat every person with dignity, no matter what they were wearing, or where they came from. Because in the end, it wasn't the luxury cars that mattered, it was the people, and they had all just learned that lesson the hard way. As the days passed, the mechanic's story spread like wildfire. It wasn't just about the luxury car he had bought, it was about the humility, the hard work, and the quiet strength behind it all. People shared his story on social media, applauding his success, but more than that, they admired how he had shown up in a world that often judges too quickly. It was a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Too often, people are quick to assume worth based on what's worn or what's seen on the surface. But true value is found in heart, determination, and integrity. The mechanic didn't need to boast or show off, he let his actions speak louder than any words could. The luxury car, sitting in his driveway, was just a symbol, a small piece of what he had earned through years of sweat, sacrifice, and perseverance. It was nothing more than the byproduct of his efforts. In the end, the message was clear: kindness, humility, and hard work will always outweigh pride. The mechanic had taught them that, not by lecturing, but by simply being himself. And that's a lesson none of them would ever forget. Thank you for watching this inspiring story. It's a powerful reminder that we should never judge someone by their appearance, as the real value of a person lies in their actions, character, and heart. This mechanic's journey shows us how humility and hard work can lead to success, no matter where we start. If you found this story as inspiring as we did, please make sure to like, comment, and share it with your friends and family. Let's spread this important message together, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that will move, inspire, and motivate you. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below, and let us know what lesson you took away from today's story. Thank you for being part of our community.